It is a time of war, and Agu and his family are running for their lives. A man beckons them into a nearby shop, and they rush inside, bolting the door behind them. In the darkness, they huddle together, hearts racing as they pray not to be found. Outside, the rattle of machine guns echoes through the streets and bullets tear through the walls as soldiers exchange fire. Suddenly, a single shot from an army tank blasts through the shop's wooden panels, sparking panic. In a moment of pure terror, one man flings the door open and bolts outside. But before he can get far, the soldiers gun him down, along with others attempting to flee. The remaining survivors are dragged out and forced to their knees, as the soldiers demand to know which faction they fight for.
You are native defense forces,
No, I am the section chief. We are trying to stop the looters.
To confirm their identities, they summon a local woman, hoping she will vouch for them. Instead, driven by an old grudge, she betrays them. Agu's father pleads for mercy, but the soldiers are unmoved. They hand down a death sentence on the spot. With no time to lose, the terrified father urges his children to run while he stays behind. A volley of gunfire erupts, cutting him down in an instant. Before Agu can process the horror, his older brother is also shot. Agu runs toward him, desperate, but another bullet grazes his head. With no other choice, he abandons his brother and flees into the forest. Alone and heartbroken, Agu wanders aimlessly, mourning his family. Hunger gnaws at him until he stumbles upon a small shack. Inside, he finds a sack of flour and some cooking utensils. He tries to start a fire, but the flames refuse to catch. With no other option, he turns vegan to satisfy his hunger, only for his body to reject the unfamiliar food. Weak and sick, he ventures deeper into the jungle. The following morning, Agu finds himself caught in the middle of a shootout. He ducks into a corner, but a man armed with a machete lunges at him. Mistaking him for a PLF soldier, the rebels drag Agu away, pinning him down and stripping him alongside other captives. Moments later, the Commandant arrives to address the group. His eyes settle on Agu, surprised to see someone so young among the hostages. The Commandant learns it was a boy named Strika who captured Agu. He turns to his second-in-command, 2IC, asking what should be done with the boy. 2EC brushes it off, insisting Agu is too small to pose a threat. But the Commandant isn't convinced. The Commandant interrogates Agu, demanding to know why he is alone in the woods. When Agu remains silent, he threatens to let Strika eat him. Terrified, Agu finally speaks, explaining that soldiers murdered his family and forced him to flee into the forest. Rather than discarding him, the Commandant sees potential.
Yes, sir!
Yes, sir!
Yes, sir!
Yes, sir!
Yes, sir!
Yes, sir!
The rebels hand Agu a box of supplies, and with that, they set off. For hours, they march through the jungle until the drone of a helicopter forces them to dive under the foliage for cover. When they reach the rebel hideout, the men break into song to announce their return. Rations are handed out to everyone, except Agu, who watches with hungry eyes. Desperate, he begs for food, but the soldiers mock him, reminding him he isn't one of them. One of the men, known as Preacher, orders Agu to stand on an empty stool and salute. Later, 2EC gathers the young soldiers. He explains that the NRC has used the chaos to form its own government, but they will not support it. Their real fight, he says, is against the corrupt politicians selling their country's resources for dollars. They are the NDF, and they will kill anyone who stands in their way. The next day, the Commandant harangues the NDF. He motivates them with talk of revenge against the PLF soldiers who assaulted their women and slaughtered their families. He urges them not only to fight, but to seize riches along the way. Later that day, the new recruits are initiated by men dressed in black, chanting strange incantations. They make cuts on Agu's skin and then force him to perform a Mr. Beast challenge. When they finally pull him out, the soldiers declare him reborn. To seal the initiation, they fire shots toward them to convince them they are now bulletproof. When the bullets ricochet, the Commandant declares they are now invincible. That night, the NDF burns down their huts and sets out. They stop at a bridge, preparing an ambush. Before the attack begins, Preacher pulls Agu aside and warns him to stay silent no matter what. Even if a snake bites him, he must die in silence. Moments later, someone signals that the PLF convoy is approaching. The NDF army blocks the road and launches a missile before they can escape. Preacher runs out of ammunition and instructs Agu to bring him more. the Commandant orders his men to seize the enemy's supplies and drag out any survivors. They drag one forward, and he sets his gaze on Agu, ordering him to finish the man. The captive falls to his knees, begging for mercy. But the Commandant leans in and reminds Agu that this is the kind of man who slaughtered his family. He then takes a weapon from one of his men and demonstrates how to use it. Agu hesitates, eyes filled with pity, but under the Commandant's pressure, he forces himself to act. Strika joins in, and the moment spirals out of control. Agu's grief turns to fury. His movements grow sharper as desperation hardens into something darker. When the adrenaline fades, Agu whispers a prayer, confessing to God that he has committed the worst of sins. However, deep down, he convinces himself it was the right thing to do. The second-in-command hands Agu his own gear and tells him to look after it. Moments later, Agu pulls away and vomits, disgusted by what this new life is turning him into. Later, Strika offers his shoes to Agu, a rare gesture of trust. Curious, Agu asks about him, but Strika only responds with gestures. Agu studies him, wondering why the boy has never said a single word, and finally asks why. The next day, the NDF sets off in the vehicles stolen from the dead. They stop in a forest where Agu and Strika get distracted in a game of hide-and-seek while the others go hunting. Some soldiers corner a rat and kill it. Shortly after, their voices rise in song, finally celebrating because they've found something to eat. Later that night, as the men dine, the Commandant speaks of the rewards they will enjoy once the war is over, from fine food to beautiful women. Soon after, the second-in-command informs him they've found some refugees and suggests returning their land. The next day, the NDF launches an assault on another village held by the PLF. As casualties mount, the second-in-command calls for support from the Commandant. Calmly, the Commandant pulls out his new 3D virtual reality goggles to scout enemy positions and then hands them to Agu to try. When Strika reaches for them, the Commandant coldly ignores him. The Commandant harangues his men and orders them to take down the bridge. Once the spectacle is over, he leads the charge, getting ahead of the others. As the NDF advances, the second-in-command emerges from his position, and gunfire erupts in every direction. The clash is fierce, but the rebels overwhelm the PLF forces. That night, as a funeral ceremony takes place, Agu searches the bodies of fallen soldiers for weapons. Instead, he finds some protein powder before heading out to rejoin the others. Moments later, Strika approaches and gestures toward the Commandant's quarters. Agu sneaks into the Commandant's office and overhears him on the radio with his superior, the Supreme Commander. The orders are clear: train the second-in-command to be a leader, conquer more villages, advance toward the capital, and chart the path to victory. The Commandant agrees without hesitation. When the call ends, Agu steps forward and hands over the protein powder he found. The Commandant praises Agu's bravery in battle, telling him he has the makings of a leader. But Agu, still just a child, insists he is content being a follower. Twisting the moment, the Commandant draws him into his room, presenting him with a cap featuring an amulet as a token of appreciation. To make matters worse, he asks Agu for a favor. And let's just say the cap isn't the only thing he takes. Agu stumbles out of the Commandant's room, barely able to walk. Strika, his only true friend, rushes to him and checks him for injuries. In that moment, Agu understands why Strika never speaks. The next morning, the boys chase chickens around the camp, hoping to catch their dinner. Agu stays apart, withdrawn from the group, until Preacher notices his mood and calls him over. Preacher makes a small cut on Agu's head and rubs a strange powder into the wound, calling it good luck. The moment Agu consumes it, his world tilts and begins to spin. Later, the Commandant gathers his men for battle. He tells them their next target is a town accused of collaborating with traitors, and warns that not a single soul will be spared. As they march toward war, the rebels pass a bus full of people, but their amulets keep them invisible. Agu, still dazed from the powder, swears he hears his mother's voice as they approach the battlefield. When the villagers scatter in panic, the NDF army guns them down mercilessly. Later, Strika and Agu exchange a fleeting smile as some of the younger recruits mimic the Commandant. Piece by piece, Agu begins to accept this brutal new reality, sinking deeper into the life of a child soldier. Later, they raid another village, tearing it apart completely. As he bursts into homes, Agu stumbles upon a woman and her young daughter. In his daze, he mistakes the woman for his mother and embraces her. She pushes him away. insisting he is not her son. The realization is painful, and Agu recoils. The soldiers then descend upon the woman with vicious laughter. Nearby, Strika turns on the girl, and Agu, terrified and overwhelmed, follows suit, sinking further into the darkness surrounding him. Overcome with pity, Agu returns to the room and puts an end to the situation, finishing the woman's suffering. The other soldiers lash out at him for ruining their fun, but Agu walks away cold and indifferent. Later, in the town hall, the Commandant oversees as grenades are stuffed into the mouths of hostages. Unfazed, he turns and leaves, announcing that the Supreme Commander has summoned them. The Commandant orders his men to leave one survivor to spread the word about the NDF. He then integrates Strika and Agu into his squad before heading off to meet the Supreme Commander. At the gate, he identifies himself, and the guards let them through. When they reach the Supreme Commander's quarters, the rebels are told to wait in the reception area. The Commandant glares with hatred at the Asian man sitting next to him, seething with suspicion. Moments later, an aide returns and informs the man that Good Blood wishes to see him. The Commandant, stunned, cannot believe the Supreme Commander would grant an audience to the Asian guy before him. The group waits for hours before anyone acknowledges them. Finally, they are led to another room, only to be told to wait again. Restless, the Commandant demands water for his men, but they are only given cheap plastic bags. His eyes drift to the large seat reserved for the Supreme Commander, and he stares at it with envy before sleep overcomes him. Several hours later, the aide returns with news. The Supreme Commander is ready to see them. Attah Goodblood greets the soldiers warmly, and then orders the Commandant's men to go eat. Only the second-in-command is told to stay behind. Once the others leave, the Supreme Commander reveals a change of plans. The assault on the capital is cancelled. Instead, he promotes the Commandant to head of security, while handing command of his battalion to the second-in-command. The Commandant quickly understands this isn't a reward, but a way to put him in his place. The second-in-command accepts the new role without hesitation, but the Commandant yells at him to shut up and leave. Alone with Attah, he accuses him of demoting him, and demands the wealth he was promised. Attah cuts him off coldly, reminding him of a soldier's obedience. He then reminds him that he is the face of the movement, not the Commandant. Defeated, the Commandant asks for one last night with his men before departing. He takes his men to a place that's hard to define, part bar, part brothel. The film keeps it intentionally vague. Inside, they are served lukewarm beer. The second-in-command makes a move to join the others, but the Commandant stops him, insisting he stay. Tonight is in honor of his promotion. The Commandant calls for the manager to bring women to entertain the men and demands a special one for the second-in-command. Soon, the women are brought in. Each man takes one, while the younger boys are pushed aside. With the men gone, Agu's eyes linger on one of the young waitresses, feeling a spark of curiosity. But before he can act, a gunshot rips through the air. The NDF soldiers drag in the body of the second-in-command, who is still clinging to life. He accuses the Commandant of setting him up, but his words fall on deaf ears. Instead, the Commandant turns to the women, demanding an explanation. One admits she was playing with his gun when it went off by accident. The second-in-command keeps shouting his accusations, but the Commandant cuts him off by ordering his men to kill them all. He then orders the second-in-command's body to be taken away, along with the rest of the women. The next morning, Agu watches as the second-in-command passes away, whispering that it was all for nothing, before exhaling his final breath. Agu silently reports his death to the Commandant, who brushes it off with cold pragmatism. "These are difficult times," he says. "You can never know who to trust." But then he sets his gaze on Agu, saying he trusts him. That night, the rebels mourn the death of the second-in-command and pray for his soul. The Commandant appoints his replacement and then urges the men to fill their own pockets instead of waiting for the Supreme Commander to reward them. Under the cloak of darkness, the NDF moves deeper into the forest. They stop to rest, but their sleep is shattered by incoming missiles. The explosions tear through the camp, killing most of them, including the newly appointed second-in-command. As Agu gazes at the bodies scattered around him, a heavy truth settles in. When the war ends, he will never know the life of a child again. They press on through the darkness of night, but deep down, Agu knows they have lost all hope for a better tomorrow. The next morning, hunger drives Agu and Strika to eat a live grasshopper. As they move deeper into the forest, shots ring out, and the group scatters for cover. When the gunfire ceases, the Commandant orders them to move forward. Agu follows but notices Strika hasn't moved. He runs back and realizes Strika is gravely wounded. Driven by sheer determination, Agu lifts him up and carries him on his back. They catch up to the others, but as the hours pass, Agu's strength falters. He wants to admit he can't go on, but instead, he leans in and softly tells Strika he can hear his mother singing. When Strika remains silent, Agu knows something is wrong. He lowers him to the ground, shaking him and pleading, but Strika doesn't move. The others gather around, understanding without words, and gently cover him with leaves. Later, Agu stays close to Preacher as he fires at an invisible enemy. Running out of ammo, Preacher orders Agu to go find more bullets. Agu searches the others, but no one has any to spare. With no other choice, he heads back to the main camp. On his way to the camp, Agu observes the state of the NDF. Corpses rot in trenches, the sick groan on the ground, and the desperate claw at the earth for gold they will never find. When he finally stands before the Commandant, Agu tells him they need bullets. The Commandant only sighs, admitting things weren't supposed to turn out this way. Then, with a hollow smile, he tells Agu not to worry, because he is his father and will always protect him. Before Agu can respond, Preacher arrives in a fury. He reports they are out of bullets and declares they are leaving. The Commandant snaps back, insisting no one supports him, but Preacher mobilizes the men. The Commandant warns the men that if they surrender to the PLF, they will lose everything, the riches they fought for, and even their families will disown them. But, one by one, every soldier except Agu declares they are leaving. In a final act of defiance, Preacher points his gun at the Commandant, threatening to kill him, only to realize the chamber is empty. At that moment, Agu turns to the Commandant, raising his weapon. The Commandant looks back and dares him. Agu lowers it, refusing to act. When asked if he intends to surrender to the PLF, Agu quietly says yes. Disappointment crosses the Commandant's face. He swears that when he rises again, he will call for them. But his words fall on deaf ears. One by one, the soldiers abandon him, Agu among them, until the Commandant is left completely alone. The NDF marches toward a PLF camp and surrenders. Following orders to drop their weapons, they put their hands on their heads as a guard calls for reinforcements. That night, the surrendered rebels are searched for hidden weapons before being taken into custody. Later, Agu wakes up to find himself in a surprisingly comfortable dormitory where children play outside as if the war and its horrors never existed. When teachers arrive, the children head out to greet them. Later in class, Agu's teacher asks how he is adjusting. Agu remains silent, but inside, he feels a small sense of relief knowing he will be there for a long time. Still, the past haunts him. Nightmares plague his sleep, and even the food sits wrong in his stomach. One night, the former NDF boys break into a riot, chanting war songs to soothe their pain. When a staff member tries to calm them, Preacher lashes out, accusing him of poisoning the food, because clearly, the UN has nothing better to do than secretly sabotage them. He insists the war isn't over, claiming their country still needs fighters like them. One night, Preacher tries to convince Agu and the other boys to go back to war, but they refuse, unwilling to return to the horrors they have already endured. Meanwhile, another boy, Randy, chooses to follow Preacher. The next day, Agu sits down for a therapy session with his teacher, Amy. Uncomfortable under her gaze, he asks her to stop looking at him, but she explains it's the only way to have a normal conversation. Agu resents her. While he has lived through the war, she knows nothing of it. Amy gently asks Agu what is on his mind. He tells her he's been thinking about his future. When she presses him, asking how he imagines it, Agu finally opens up. He admits he has done terrible things and witnessed worse. But now, all he wants is a chance to be happy. If he told her everything he says, she would see him as a beast, forgetting that he once had a family who loved him. Shortly after, a small miracle occurs. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, Agu allows himself to just be a child again. On a sunny beach, he runs, laughs, and plays, free for a moment from the shadow of war.